Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this breaking update. We just want to bring you up to speed on the protests that are taking place in downtown Portland. Sixth straight night of massive protests in the wake of the death of George Floyd. This is a live look from Sky 8 at the scene in downtown Portland. People marched from Southeast Portland and other locations on the east side tonight across the Morrison Bridge, and we have thousands and thousands of people. Let's go to Mike Benner on the ground, who is giving us our report just from the field. Mike, you've been following these protesters as they came through downtown. What are you seeing now?
Well, good evening, Maggie. I can tell you that right now we're in Terry Shrunk Plaza watching the scene unfolding outside the Justice Center. I'll have my photographer, Kenny Mack, push into the scene. And there are hundreds of people at the fence line that surrounds the Justice Center. If you followed our coverage last night, there was a group of protesters that splintered off from the main group yesterday and approached the fence line and engaged police, and that's when we saw all of the trouble. What I can tell you tonight, the difference is the crowd that approached the Justice Center tonight is much larger and seems more organized than it did last night. This crowd, many of them were in the waterfront just an hour ago rallying, and it almost seemed, although I didn't hear it, that there was some sort of organized effort to move towards this direction. So far, nothing too serious, though. The crowd is chanting, take off your riot gear. There's no riot here, over and over. They've been chanting George Floyd's name. And then when there's a little bit of a lull in the action, if you will, police will say on the intercom, please do not touch our fence. If you touch the fence or mess with it, you are subject to arrest. So there are warnings that police are already yelling out over the loudspeaker. Now, to catch you up on the evening, the demonstrations and protests started several hours ago. There was a group at Pioneer Courthouse Square that marched to Inner Southeast, Revolution Hall to be exact. They met with a group there, sort of like last night, and they came back to downtown Portland, this time crossing the Morrison Bridge instead of the Burnside Bridge. A large crowd, thousands of people. Unclear if it tops last night, but still a large crowd. They marched across the Morrison and then ended up for about an hour and a half in the waterfront park there on Southwest NATO. They rallied, talked about reform and change and police accountability, those sorts of things. And here we stand outside the Justice Center, and we're just keeping an eye on things and seeing what's going to happen. Maggie.
All right, Mike Ben, I really appreciate it. I want to point out Portland police have tweeted out that they're thankful for those who are protesting peacefully while they're monitoring that group that is at the fence where you are. And to that point, we have a shot of protesters who are marching across the Burnside Bridge. I think this is our shot from Sky 8 still showing the crowd that Mike was talking about, but we do have protesters as well at the same time crossing the Burnside. And again, groups started on the east side of the river. There's that shot right there. Again, this is a crowd that, is marching to the east side of the city. So at this point, it's hard to judge which crowd is larger, but we do want to point out that the shots that we saw earlier tell us thousands of people are in Portland's downtown core, again, protesting in the wake of the death of George Floyd, a Minnesota man, a black man who died while a white police officer kneeled on his neck for 9 minutes. Just so much pain across the country, including here in Portland. And this morning, Mayor Ted Wheeler and Police Chief Jamie Resch held a press conference to discuss the continued protests in our area, and they were joined by Dr. Markeisha Smith, the city's Office of Equity and Human Rights Director. She made it clear that what we're witnessing this week is not just a response to the death of George Floyd 9 days ago in Minneapolis, but it's a response to what's been going on in America for hundreds of years.
I can't breathe. I keep experiencing this phrase, the mental, emotional, psychological manifestation of what is normally a physical reaction to choking, loss of breath, struggling to fill one's lungs with air so that the exercise of inhaling and exhaling comfortably continues. I experience this phrase as a cry for help, a black man or woman's last words, a plea to be released from the pressure to no avail. Black folks in this country are suffocating, literally, as many have taken their last breath at the hands of police brutality, and metaphorically, as a community who is struggling under the weight of racism. The events that have transpired over the past few days and nights highlight the reality that the COVID-19 pandemic has not erased the reality that racism still exists. White supremacy and white supremacists are not following a stay-at-home order. Racism hasn't been quarantined. We don't have drive-through locations to test for racism. It simply shows up in overt and covert ways. And while we anxiously await a vaccination to protect against the coronavirus, we are not looking for a vaccination for racism because that would mean removing power and privilege, acknowledging the hate that people carry in the very fabric of their souls for Black folks. As protesters have organized in cities across this country, including right here in the city of Portland, it is painfully clear that Black folks are tired and that empty words and promises for justice and reform are no longer enough. The Black community is demanding action. And while the vast majority of the Black community would not condone violence and looting, the reality is that when over 400 years of oppression continue to play out in our communities, there is a tipping point. A little bit of education. Ironically, the origin of the word loot is Hindi. It found its way into the English language via the British Empire's centuries-long rampage of theft and bloodshed in India. So if you only talk about looting when people take stuff from stores and not when capitalism steals from workers every day, or imperialism destroys lives to grab resources, or settler colonialism violently oppresses whole groups for generations, then guess what? You're having the wrong conversation. We need to verbalize and acknowledge the fullness of the term anti-Blackness, the fear, devaluation, or abuse of Black people. And anti-Blackness is in full effect in our current context. And a moment of truth, Black folks can no longer be responsible for carrying the burden of white fragility, white guilt, trying to fix a system that was never designed for them in the first place, and simultaneously mourning the death and destruction happening in our communities. As a leader for the Office of Equity and Human Rights at the City of Portland, I am committed to continuing to engage in action both internally and externally. The Office of Equity and Human Rights has set a strong foundation for equity work in the City of Portland, and the city has voiced their commitment. In 2015, Council adopted the citywide racial equity goals and strategies. There's been support for Bureau racial equity plans. We have training for all city employees with our Racial Equity 101. We have connection to community through various advisory bodies and committees, and our recent response to COVID-19 efforts. But this is not enough. We have to take what is on paper and make it happen. And one single office within our city structure can't do this alone. There must be a collective acknowledgement of the pain and trauma the Black community is facing, and a collective commitment to working with the Black community to find actionable steps that are authentic and sustainable. I would offer that our city, and in fact our state, allow the space for Black folks to grieve, to feel the weariness, frustration, fear, and victimization that accompanies watching the treacherous balance of life and death play out across our news and media outlets, and that we get ready for what comes next, the removal of systems that were designed to exclude and the replacement of those systems with ones that are designed to empower. Thank you.
Again, that was Dr. Markeisha Smith this morning. All right, going back to our shot of the crowds that were walking across the Burnside Bridge, just kind of pointing to how sort of scattered things are becoming across downtown. Some of the people that were on the bridge crossing have now gone back into downtown Portland. Our photographer is walking with them. They are headed, from what we can tell, toward the Justice Center, walking down 3rd at the moment. So let's go now to Mike Benner's shot. He's there with photographer Ken McCormick. They are at the Justice Center, showing the crowd that is already there, basically. So the crowd that you just saw is walking toward this one. This is outside the Justice Center, where there is still fencing around that building that is designed to protect it. That fencing on the other side of it, obviously, police and National Guard troops who were activated by Governor Kate Brown 2 days ago to sort of help protect this building. This after last week on Friday night, some protesters broke windows. It was a small crowd, but they had a huge impact, broke windows, got inside the Justice Center and set a fire on the 1st floor. Portland police have been tweeting, saying that the crowd outside the Justice Center is growing. And they said, quote, "We support your First Amendment rights. Please follow officers' orders and have a peaceful assembly." So again, we've seen thousands marching through downtown Portland. Right now, it's hard to tell just how big the crowd outside the Justice Center is. At this point, it seems like people are remaining peaceful in that area of downtown. But we should point out, when people have gone to the fencing at the Justice Center on previous nights, that has been the source of some clashes with police. There have also been times when it hasn't been a source of confrontation, and they've just had conversations with officers. So we've seen police and the city struggle to kind of figure out how to respond in moments when tensions rise. When there have been clashes, it seems like it's sort of spun out of control rather quickly. That's what happened last night, but we've had entirely peaceful nights as well, and we know that's everybody's goal here. Now you can see people definitely on the move. That seems to be the crowd that was coming down 3rd that we showed you, that first shot coming out of Dr. Smith's soundbite from this morning. So you can see Sky 8 pulling back its camera there and just getting a look at the size and scope of this crowd. Again, marching down 3rd toward the Justice Center in downtown Portland. They will meet a crowd who is already there. We have a crew on the ground with both groups. Mike Benner is there at the Justice Center, kind of watching how things are unfolding. And that's a look at that shot. So you can see that's sort of the fencing there in the background. That crowd right now is relatively small, but police have tweeted that it is growing. And based on the tone of their tweets, that does in and of itself seem to be a source of anxiety for them. They just want people, they say, to peacefully assemble. They have the right to do that outside the fence. They're just hoping that everything remains peaceful. So again, at this point, we have 2 crews on the ground. We have Sky 8 in the air. And we are going to keep bringing you updates online and on social media throughout the evening. We'll basically come back out here and stream online again if we feel like things are shifting. But for the time being, let's hope this remains peaceful, and we'll bring you updates as they come, and of course have the latest on KGW News at 11. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Laurel Porter. We want to break into your programming just for a couple of minutes here to give you an update on really a powerful scene in Portland. It's night 6 of protests over the death of George Floyd. We want to give you this update. This is a live look from Sky 8 as protesters are gathered now around the Justice Center in downtown Portland. This started with a gathering at Revolution Hall. The crowd then marched across the Morrison Bridge. Last night it was the Burnside Bridge, tonight the Morrison Bridge, and then they met in Waterfront Park. They listened there to several speakers. Then part of the crowd stayed downtown right around the Justice Center. Let's check in with our Mike Benner, who is with the protesters at the Justice Center. And Mike, I heard you say earlier there are more there tonight than it seemed to be last night.
Yeah, I would say so, Laurel. I'd say several hundred people surrounding the Justice Center right now. Let me step out of the way and give you a live look here. My photographer, Kenny Mack, will push into the scene. There is fencing surrounding the entire building. This coming after late last week when we saw people break inside and try to start fires and things of that nature. Earlier this week, police and authorities reminding people this is not a police building. This you can consider a community building since it houses inmates who are part of the community. So anyhow, there is fencing that surrounds the building, and tonight several hundred people surround it. The difference from last night seemed more disorganized. This seems more organized, and perhaps that's why right now it is peaceful. Police are giving commands to protesters saying, please don't touch the fence, don't mess with it. If you do, you'll be subject to arrest. So far, nothing too crazy, though. This is a peaceful demonstration, a peaceful gathering outside the Justice Center, following several hours of marches, very peaceful through downtown and the inner southeast Portland, and then a rally in Waterfront Park. KGW will stay here on the scene and follow the developments. For now, I'll send it back to you.
And if there are any developments, we'll be sure to have them online and more for you at 11. Thank you, Mike. This is another camera shot. We have a live look where there's another crowd of people. This crowd still marching through downtown. This is at 3rd Avenue. The protesters are marching south toward the Justice Center. So a lot of groups there converging at the Justice Center where Mike was. We want to show you earlier, really, this has been a powerful scene, a 6th night of protest, several thousand people. Some started at Pioneer Courthouse Square, others at Revolution Hall. They met there at Revolution Hall in southeast Portland, marched down Stark, and then here you see across the Morrison Bridge. Really a remarkable display of so many people wanting to be a part of this significant moment in history. So far, very peaceful, showing solidarity with George Floyd and the black community in its sorrow and anguish and outrage about what happened, and a demand for justice and an end to racism and police brutality. And people for a 6th night wanting to be a part of what's been called a real shift, a turning point in American history. People are hoping it really does lead to change. In the last night and a few other nights, later in the evening, it's turned into destruction and some disturbances, some violent things happening late in the evening. We hope that doesn't happen tonight. We're going to keep an eye on it for you. We're going to be back at 11 o'clock with complete, thorough coverage for you, and we'll have any updates when they become available. If we have anything that happens down there at the Justice Center that you need to know about, we'll have that online on KGW.com and on the KGW app. Until then, we'll return you to your programming, and we'll see you at 11 o'clock. Have a good evening. A night of peace and powerful messages. Protesters once again take to the streets of Portland to speak out against racial injustice. Plus, it's not just the Rose City. Other cities around Oregon join in on this historic moment. And the roadmap to reopening. We now know when much of the state of Oregon may enter the next phase of getting up and running again.
This is KGW News at 11.
First tonight, another powerful show of support from Portland. Thousands fill the Morrison Bridge tonight, marching to honor George Floyd and speak out against police brutality and racism in America. It comes on the same day the Minneapolis officers involved in Floyd's death faced increased charges. Thank you for joining us. I'm Laurel Porter. A large crowd remains tonight in downtown Portland. This is a live look at that from Sky 8. Now, thankfully, it's been a very peaceful night. You can see thousands of people there. We hope it stays peaceful. From Sky 8, we've been able to see protesters talking with officers at that fence that's blocking off the Justice Center area down on 3rd. Our Mike Benner's live in downtown Portland, where the crowd is now gathered around the Justice Center. And Mike, it looks like several thousand are there. It looks like a bigger crowd around the Justice Center tonight.
Much bigger, Laurel. Right now we're on the outskirts of Terry Shrunk Plaza, watching the scene here behind us. My photographer, Kenny Mack, will push in here. Again, this is the Justice Center in downtown Portland. A crowd of several thousand people, that according to the Portland Police Bureau, is currently gathered at the fence line there. You'll remember that late last week, people broke into the lobby of the Justice Center and caused quite a bit of damage. So since then, fencing has been up, and tonight, that is where demonstrators at this late hour have decided to congregate. But we got to point out, it has been extremely peaceful. There's been chanting, as you mentioned, dialogue between demonstrators and police. Quite a different scene from last night. So this is good. This is very good to see a peaceful demonstration. And what you see right here has followed a peaceful night of protesting in Portland. Take a look.
Wednesday night in Portland, another bridge is occupied by thousands of demonstrators, mourning the death of George Floyd and calling for police accountability. Sky 8 gives us this incredible view. The peaceful demonstrators spend the better half of the evening marching through inner southeast and downtown Portland before stopping at Waterfront Park. Just look at the scene. This rally is for change they say this country has desperately needed for years.
How badly, in your opinion, is change necessary?
It's extremely necessary, I have a daughter, and I'm thinking about, all the kids, my buddy, we all got kids, so we all think about down the line and just wondering how long this is going to be going on, man. So something has to happen, and it has to happen at the top.
We all have a right to be here. We all need this place right here. So, you know what, man, we want justice, and, you know what I'm saying, we're going to all live in harmony.
All right, back out here live in downtown Portland. You're looking live at a crowd of thousands surrounding the Justice Center. Keep in mind, tonight's events started around 5, 6 o'clock, so people have been out here for 4 to 5 hours. So how long these people stay out here is unclear at this point. KGW will be here and kind of monitoring the scene, so keep it tuned to KGW on air and online for updates. For now, Laurel, back to you.
Well, it is so impressive. So many people for the 6th night in a row, and it looks very peaceful. We hope it stays that way. Thank you, Mike. If anything changes, we'll come back to you. Another view tonight, our photographer Chad has this view of the crowd from 3rd and Salmon, and you can see some people leaving the gathering there now. And we will switch back to our live crews here and at Mike Benner's location at the Justice Center if anything changes. And like they have for the past couple of nights, one of the groups of protesters started at Revolution Hall in southeast Portland. They then started marching toward downtown. A few thousand people were in that crowd. Organizers addressed them first. They heard a lot of speeches before the march began, and it was really impressive as they went down Stark and covered many, many blocks. Portland police and the city's mayor have been having press conferences every morning to debrief reporters on what happened each night before. Today, the Bureau faced a lot of questions about tactics used in last night's protest. So they went a step further. KGW's Maggie Vespa joins us now. And Maggie, there was a second press conference later today.
Yeah, Laurel, there was a lot of moments came out last night. We saw video of police spray painting cars, and the chief actually today stood by that, saying it helps them follow up with people in those cars who police saw handing out weapons to protesters. There was also an instance of a police SUV speeding through an intersection as protesters moved barricades. We've had video of that on our social media. The chief told us today that is under investigation. Now, this is video of just kind of generically the more chaotic moments last night. Again, this is last night, not tonight. Things were peaceful for hours before this, but once this got going, we saw a lot of questions. Portland police basically want people to know in moments like these, they use tear gas, they say, when they see large crowds who are being violent. They say they do that to try to clear people out. They also use flashbang type devices, they said today, when it's one or two specific people who they believe are being violent. And then today, at that second press conference, the commander of PPB's rapid response team got very candid about how officers are feeling right now.
And we are physically and emotionally exhausted. We are physically and emotionally in pain. I have officers that are injured, physical injuries, and I can tell you that every night when we come back to the precinct, we're emotionally in pain because we're seeing a community divided like we have never experienced in our careers. People have this sense that we enjoy going out and doing what we do, even when it turns into crowd control, and I can tell you there's nothing further from the truth. We love our community. We want to serve our community and facilitate free speech. And my experience over the last 6 days has been that the majority of people out there are doing exactly that, engaging in free speech. They're peaceful. But I see a small group of people coming downtown who are angry, who just want to fight against the system, who look for every opportunity they can to turn it into a violent situation, a violent conflict with the police.
Lieutenant Franz Schaining there. He also did this sort of show and tell with his riot gear because he knows people have concerns about police officers using sort of military style gear. He described, for example, a ballistic vest with extra pouches for munitions, aka flashbang type devices, pepper spray, radios, and first aid equipment. And Laurel will be posting more clips from that press conference at kgw.com. Back to you.
Well, we hope we don't see that conflict tonight. Thank you, Maggie. Outside of Portland, protests continue as smaller towns show their support for the Black community. Catherine Cook spent the day in Scappoose where protesters gathered. She joins us live now from Pioneer Courthouse Square. Catherine?
Now, Laurel, it's a very different scene out here tonight at the square compared to this time last night. It's quiet, peaceful, and nearly empty. In fact, you can see the mural here on the ground that says, "We are together." We found that sense of unity in St. Helens tonight. That's where community members held a protest and a march. It was a gathering that almost didn't happen. The reason? Many people in St. Helens were afraid of what might happen if they stood up for the cause.
St. Helens loves you!
In St. Helens, voices and signs of support bobbed up and down as people marched through town Wednesday night. They said Black Lives Matter in a community where Black lives, well, there aren't very many of them.
It's important for communities that lack diversity to come together because it shows just a few numbers of diverse people that they're welcome and they can stay and live here safely and they don't have to fear for their lives.
18-year-old Savannah Manning is one of just a handful of Black students at her high school. Earlier this week, she shared how she's been made to feel at times living in St. Helens.
In my 7th grade class, my teacher would not allow me to wear my hair down compared to everybody else because my hair was fluffy and it was distracting, but it was different and it's beautiful. And it just made me upset that I had to deal with that.
Savannah was excited to join a different Black Lives Matter protest organized by students in St. Helens until community members stopped it. They were worried about threats posted on social media suggesting riots like those in Portland would happen in St. Helens.
Sir, you look like a hoodlum for sure.
But then other community members stepped in and made this protest happen.
And all these hoodlums out here they're school teachers and kids.
And the fact that we can come here together today and protest peacefully and I can let my voice be heard makes me happy.
There were other voices too. One man shouted his response to the Black Lives Matter movement. Around town, a few businesses closed for the day and boarded up their windows, including the post office. A group of people carried guns. A message, they say, to any outsiders with destructive ideas.
We heard threats that they would come down here, try to destroy the town, so we're here to protect it and keep the peace and support the protesters.
Then there was Kirk Pierce. He designed these flyers of George Floyd and passed them around.
Well, I just thought it was important for, as a white guy, to use my voice to try to bring awareness to the injustice that's been happening for 400 years, and it's definitely boiled over.
Those here hope this is the beginning of a new day.
What do we want? Equality. How are we going to do it? Peacefully.
And if it wasn't already crystal clear from those pictures and video tonight, the protest was very peaceful. There was no damage to businesses. And we came away, Laurel, with a sense that people in St. Helens felt very proud of what happened this evening. Back to you.
Catherine Cook live at Pioneer Courthouse Square for us tonight. Thank you, Catherine. New developments tonight in the death of George Floyd, which sparked the unrest we're seeing now. Derek Chauvin, the officer whose knee was on Floyd's neck, now faces a more serious second-degree murder charge. Also, 3 other officers involved in the arrest now face charges as well. All 4 officers were fired from the Minneapolis Police Department. Tomorrow, Floyd's family and thousands of supporters are expected to gather at North Central University in Minneapolis for the first of at least 4 public memorials. We will carry that memorial live here on KGW or on KGW.com beginning at 11 a.m. Now to the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. Much of Oregon is getting ready for the next step in reopening. This Friday, 31 counties could enter phase 2, while Multnomah County still waits to apply for phase 1. As Galen Etlin reports today, Governor Kate Brown and state health officials laid out the roadmap they say will likely be following for months.
Oregonians, look out for one another.
A call for unity from Governor Brown Wednesday to fight COVID-19 as counties get ready to open further.
I know our economy has taken an extraordinary blow, but let me be clear.